Okay, so today we're diving into something really, really massive. A project in China that's poised to eclipse the Three Gorges Dam. And not just in sheer size, right? But also in its, well, its profound geopolitical and environmental impact across Asia. We're talking about China starting construction on what's set to be the world's largest hydropower dam. Our mission here in this deep dive is really to unpack this, the engineering audacity, the huge energy potential, but also the very real concerns, international and local, that it's stirring up. We're drawing all this from recent news, expert analyses you've shared with us, and the river involved, the Yarlung Tsangpo, a critical waterway for millions.
Exactly. And I think it's important to grasp right away, this isn't just a construction project. Huge, yes, but it's much more. It's a nexus of water, power, deep-seated geopolitics, and fundamentally people's lives, livelihoods across several countries. It really shows how tangled these issues are.
Right. Let's start there then. Let's try and get our heads around the incredible scale. What are we actually talking about here? Numbers, features.
Okay, so the project's name is the Motuo Hydropower Station. And when it's done, it's expected to be the world's largest hydropower dam, significantly bigger capacity-wise than Three Gorges. Some estimates say potentially 3 times the energy output. Think about that.
3 times. Wow.
Yeah, and the price tag. Estimated at around 1.2 trillion yuan. That's roughly, what, 167 billion US dollars.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that gives you a sense of the financial scale involved.
Almost hard to imagine. And, for a project like this, especially there, what makes that specific location so good for hydropower? The geography.
That's the key, really. It's about the natural landscape. The dam's being built in Tibetan territory, specifically in the Yarlung Tsangpo Canyon, which people say is the world's largest and deepest canyon on land.
Okay.
And the crucial feature there is something called the Great Bend. This is where the river takes this incredibly sharp U-turn around a mountain, Namcha Barwa. And in doing so, it drops hundreds of meters in altitude.
Yeah.
Very suddenly.
Ah, so a massive natural drop.
Exactly. Huge hydropower potential. And the engineering plan is, well, just as ambitious. They're talking about straightening work, diverting water through tunnels. Earlier reports mentioned drilling multiple tunnels, maybe 20 kilometers long, straight through the Namcha Barwa mountain.
Through the mountain itself.
Yes, to create this cascade. 5 cascading power stations are planned to really harness that drop.
Incredible engineering. So how does this massive undertaking fit into China's, bigger picture, their strategic goals?
Well, the official line from China focuses on a couple of things. Ecological protection, boosting local prosperity in Tibet. But it's also, very clearly, a central piece of President Xi Jinping's xidiandongsong policy.
Which means
Sending Western electricity eastwards, essentially using energy generated in the less developed West, including Tibetan areas, to power the huge, energy-hungry cities in the East. So while some electricity will support Tibet's needs, the vast majority is destined for transmission outwards.
So there's a bit of a tension there, maybe, between the stated local benefits and the national energy strategy.
You could certainly see it that way. It's a pattern we often see with major infrastructure projects, especially in sensitive regions, balancing national development goals against, local impacts and autonomy.
Right.
It really highlights those competing priorities.
Okay, that makes sense. But a project this big on a river that flows across borders, it's bound to cause ripples, right? Let's talk about the concerns from India and Bangladesh.
Absolutely. And this is where it gets really interesting geopolitically. Control over a river like the Yarlung Tsangpo. It's a powerful thing. Remember, this river flows down into India, Arunachal Pradesh, Assam becomes the Siang, then the Brahmaputra, and it feeds into Bangladesh too, is the Jamuna. There was a report, I think, from the Lodi Institute back in 2020.
Yeah.
It basically said that control over these rivers originating on the Tibetan plateau gives China, and I quote, a chokehold on India's economy.
A chokehold. That's strong language. What does that mean in practical terms? What parts of India's economy are vulnerable?
Well, think about agriculture. Assam, for example, relies heavily on the Brahmaputra for irrigation. Any major change in water flow could be devastating for farmers, for food security.
Right, agriculture. Makes sense.
And then there's downstream hydropower in India, too. Their own projects depend on a reliable flow. So the chokehold idea is about the potential to, well, manipulate water levels, whether intentionally or just as a consequence of upstream dam operations. That affects irrigation, power, maybe even river navigation. It gives Beijing potentially a lot of leverage.
Okay. And how are officials in India reacting? You mentioned the chief minister of Arunachal Pradesh.
Yes, Pema Khandu. He's expressed really serious fears, worries that the Siang and Brahmaputra could dry up considerably. He called the dam an existential threat to local tribes like the Adi people, their livelihoods, their land.
Existential threat.
He even talked about a potential water bomb scenario.
What's that?
The fear of a sudden, massive release of water from the dam, maybe due to structural issues or even intentional release, that could just devastate everything downstream, wiping out property, land, risking lives.
That sounds terrifying. And the official Indian government response?
India's Ministry of External Affairs has formally raised concerns with Beijing. They've pushed for China to ensure downstream interests aren't harmed, and they've stressed the need for transparency, for consultation, sharing data and plans.
Have Bangladesh officials weighed in too?
Yes, they apparently sent a letter to Beijing back in February, also asking for more information about the project.
And China's position on all this, how have they responded?
Back in 2020, their foreign ministry basically said they have a legitimate right to develop the river on their territory. They maintain that they have considered downstream impacts and that their projects are reasonable. They tend to frame it purely as development.
So not much reassurance there for downstream countries.
Not explicitly, no. And in response, India is actually planning its own large hydropower dam on the Siang River.
Ah, a countermeasure.
Sort of, yeah. The
Okay.
idea is it could act as a buffer, hold back sudden surges if China releases water unexpectedly, and generally give India more control over the flow within its own borders to mitigate flooding risks.
Right, trying to regain some control. Okay, so we've got the international tensions. What about inside China? The local impacts on Tibetans, on the environment there?
That's the other crucial dimension. China often frames these projects as beneficial, clean energy, economic uplift for rural areas, including Tibet.
Mm-hmm.
But activists paint a very different picture. They see it as another instance of Beijing exploiting Tibetan resources and land with little regard for the local population.
Is there evidence of pushback or conflict?
Yes, definitely. There have been protests against other dam projects in Tibetan areas. Just
Wow.
last year, there were reports, I think the BBC covered it, with verified footage of authorities rounding up hundreds of Tibetans who were protesting a different hydropower dam.
Mm-hmm.
There were accounts of arrests, beatings, serious injuries.
So real suppression of dissent.
It appears so. And beyond the human rights concerns, there are major environmental worries, too. You're talking about potentially flooding valleys in Tibet known for unique biodiversity.
Yeah.
That's a significant loss. Plus, there's the sheer risk of building these enormous dams in a seismically active region. The area has earthquake fault lines.
Building a mega dam on a fault line, that sounds inherently risky.
Extremely. A major earthquake could have catastrophic consequences, not just locally, but potentially downstream as well.
Okay, so summing this up, it's a project of incredible engineering ambition, promising huge amounts of energy, but it's set against this backdrop of really serious international friction, human rights issues, and significant environmental dangers.
It's
Current.
complex.
Right.
It really is. It encapsulates a core tension we see globally, doesn't it? The drive for clean energy, for economic growth, bumping up against the hard realities of shared resources like rivers, and the well-being of communities, both local and downstream. There are no easy answers here.
Well, we hope this deep dive has helped you, our listeners, get a clearer picture of this massive undertaking, to see the connections between the engineering, the politics, the human stories, the environmental risks.
And maybe something to think about as you reflect on all this. What does responsible resource management actually look like in practice, especially when dealing with this kind of immense power crossing borders, affecting vulnerable people and fragile ecosystems? It's definitely something worth mulling over, especially as we face growing energy demands globally.
Absolutely. Thanks for diving deep with us today.